Hey everyone, and welcome to today's explainer. I am so incredibly excited to be your guide for this science tutorial, because honestly, we have one major goal today. We are going to completely shatter the myth of the simple, pre-programmed insect. For the longest time, we've basically just looked at bugs as these tiny little biological machines, but the latest behavioral science, it's actually proving that their minds are capable of truly astonishing things.
So, I want you to ask yourselves this fundamental question right now. Are insects really just biological robots? I mean, our old assumptions told us that their tiny bodies were purely driven by basic reflexive instincts, right? Just eating, surviving, and reproducing to preserve the species. The whole shebang. But what if I told you they actually have distinct personalities? Or the ability to use tools? Or even the capacity for complex logical reasoning?
Okay, let's dive into this and take a quick look at our scientific syllabus for today. First, we're going to start by rethinking the insect brain. Next, we'll examine the problem-solving bumblebees, then the social genius of wasps. After that, we are defining transitive inference, and finally, we'll explore sentience and insect welfare.
Section 1. Rethinking the insect brain.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of the numbers. It raises a fascinating physiological question. Just how much physical brain power is really required to navigate the world effectively? Well, consider the number 1 million. That is the exact number of neural connections in a single bee's brain. Now compare that to a human's 86 billion nerve cells. A million might sound kind of small by comparison, sure, but when we actually look at what an insect does with that exact neural network, it's nothing short of an engineering marvel.
Get this, a bee's brain is literally the size of a single grain of rice. Yet, working through its nerve cords and a central memory center called the mushroom body, it processes shapes, colors, and complex virtual landscapes at absolute lightning speed. In one study, researchers actually took bees, put them in a dark box, biked them 3 kilometers away to a totally unknown town square, and just released them. And guess what? Using an innate solar compass and a virtual map stored right there in that tiny rice-sized brain, every single bee calculated a brand new route and navigated perfectly back to their hive. Mind-blowing, right? But navigation is one thing. Adapting to something you have literally never seen before is another.
Section 2. Problem-solving bumblebees.
This brings us to some genuinely groundbreaking research being done by Lars Chitka at Queen Mary University in London. He basically decided to put this tiny brain power to the ultimate test. Chitka designed an intelligence test for bumblebees, and honestly, the setup plays out like a heist movie. First, he places sugar water in artificial flowers. Once the bees know it's there, step 2. He blocks access with a plexiglass plate. So the bees can clearly see the sugar, but they can't physically reach it. The only possible way to get the food is by learning to pull a small string connected to the flower from underneath the glass. So the question is, can a bee solve a completely new physical puzzle it has never encountered in nature? Well, after just 3 minutes of analyzing the situation, bumblebee number 81 grabbed the string, pulled it, and got the sugar. And it gets better. Soon after, her peers watched her, figured it out, and completely followed suit.
So the crucial point is why this actually matters for our understanding of science. Think about it. These bees have never, ever had to pull threads in their entire evolutionary history. This is absolutely not some pre-programmed instinct. It proves that insects can learn completely novel, brand new movements to solve brand new problems. It demonstrates a crystal clear capacity to use tools, and quite frankly, it puts bumblebee intelligence right up there on par with highly intelligent birds, like clever crows. They aren't just reacting blindly, they're actively figuring things out. Now, solitary problem solving is incredible for sure, but what happens when you throw complex social dynamics into the mix?
Section 3. The social genius of wasps.
Let's travel over to the University of Michigan to study a totally different creature, the paper wasp. To really understand the paper wasp, we have to compare it to the honeybee. A honeybee colony is this strictly organized superorganism. Everybody has a rigid task, there is one single queen, and a story. But a paper wasp colony, as researchers put it, it's a lot more like a loosely organized roommate arrangement. Instead of one undisputed royal, multiple females lay eggs and are constantly fighting each other for dominance to become the queen. Because of this totally chaotic dynamic, their daily interactions aren't driven by rigid hive tasks. They're driven by dynamic, constantly shifting, individual relationships.
And here is where it gets crazy. Because they need to manage these complex roommate relationships, paper wasps have evolved something absolutely extraordinary: highly distinct faces. Literally, no two paper wasps have the same facial texture or color. Some will have these little yellow eyebrows, others have distinctive black spots. And more importantly, wasps have the genius ability to visually recognize and actually remember these individual faces. They use this visual memory to keep track of who is cooperative, who's aggressive, and who they've already fought in the past. To maintain any kind of order in a nest that chaotic, they literally have to know exactly who's who. Which brings us to the absolute peak of our cognitive escalation arc.
Section 4. Defining transitive inference.
Now, knowing who is great and all, but can a paper wasp take that information and solve a logic puzzle that is actually too complex for a human toddler to grasp? To answer that, we have to introduce a vital scientific concept, transitive inference. Simply put, this is the ability to logically deduce unknown relationships from known ones. Up until very recently, scientists firmly believed that only humans, monkeys, and maybe certain highly developed birds or fish possess this level of advanced reasoning.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how transitive inference works, using a really simple stuffed animal analogy. Okay, if you know for a fact that a dragon is a better fighter than a cow, and you also know that a cow is a better fighter than a dinosaur, well, you can logically deduce that a dragon must be a better fighter than a dinosaur, even if you have literally never seen the dragon and the dinosaur actually fight each other. You are just using logic to bridge that gap.
So, researchers at the University of Michigan decided to swap out stuffed animals for colors and mild electric shocks to test the wasps. They trained the wasps on 5 different colors. Through repeated pairings, the wasps learned that, say, blue is more painful than yellow, and maybe purple is more painful than blue. Basically, they are building a logical ranking system right there in their tiny minds. The ultimate test was presenting the wasp with 2 colors they had never, ever seen paired together before. And amazingly, using transitive inference, the wasps logically deduced the unknown relationship and correctly chose the safer color. No way, right?
Now you might be wondering, why on earth does a bug need this specific level of genius? Well, researcher Elizabeth Tibbets explains it perfectly. If they have transitive inference, they can guess how strong other wasps are without actually needing to fight. By just sitting back and observing a fight between 2 of her roommates, a wasp can logically deduce her own rank in the hierarchy. It allows her to avoid deadly, totally unnecessary conflicts, effectively keeping the peace through sheer logical deduction. Okay, let's move to our final section and see how this all builds into something much, much larger.
Section 5. Sentience and Insect Welfare.
We've firmly established that insects can navigate, use tools, recognize faces, and even use advanced logic. But all of this intelligence leads us to a highly debated ethical frontier. The critical question researchers and philosophers are asking right now is this: if insects are highly intelligent, do they also have feelings? Do they cognitively perceive pain? Basically, do they have a subjective inner world, or are they just experiencing automatic biological reflexes? This is a huge topic currently being fiercely debated by experts, like the philosopher Jonathan Birch.
If we trace the scientific method over time, the evolution of our understanding here is honestly pretty stark. In the early 1900s, scientist Carl von Frisch actually sliced a feeding bee right in half, saw it continue to drink for a few seconds, and just mistakenly concluded insects only have mindless reflexes and don't feel pain. Fast forward to the 2000s, and we proved that other invertebrates like lobsters absolutely cognitively process pain. That literally changed animal welfare laws in the UK. Then, in a landmark 2022 study, Lars Chichka proved that bees will cognitively choose to suppress their natural reflex to flee from a painfully hot 55-degree surface. Why? Solely because they know a much sweeter 40% sugar solution is waiting for them there. They are making a calculated cognitive choice to endure pain for reward.
The ethical implications of this sentience are, frankly, massive. Many insect species definitively possess pain receptors, and philosophers argue this capacity for feeling might even include comfort, discomfort, joy, or excitement. Acknowledging this severely complicates human activities. It raises massive questions about industrial agriculture, which relies heavily on insecticides that literally subject bugs to minutes-long, agonizing deaths. It also impacts the emerging insect food industry, where millions of mealworms are bred and mass frozen to death. If they are truly sentient, how we farm them suddenly becomes a major welfare issue.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer, and I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If these tiny creatures genuinely possess a subjective inner world, if they can learn, reason, recognize faces, and truly feel pain, how should this knowledge change the way we treat them? Because the science is absolutely clear. The bugs out there in our backyards are far, far from simple pre-programmed robots. They are brilliant, complex minds. Thanks so much for joining me for this tutorial, and hey, keep questioning the world around you.